Hey lady, I am so freaking jazzed that you're here. My name is Emily, and I am a clinical social worker deeply passionate about what's going on in between our ears. I am here to help build up your toolbox against self doubt, social comparison, and nasty self talk to help keep you kind to your mind. You know, we all have something going on in that noggin of ours that isn't always kind. So let's put in the legwork and flex those mindset muscles so that we can move the mountains we were meant to freaking move. Let's go.
Okay, cool. Katy, I'm so excited to have you here and have the opportunity to sit down and chat with you because I was introduced to you a little over a year ago at a conference and then got to experience you again this year. And really what hit me the most about you is one, you are just so unapologetically raw with your story and where you're at now, where you've come from, how you've navigated in between, and really how you have brought your rock bottom girl with you along to now. And really by that I mean just the version of you that you spoke about when I was first introduced to you, but also continue to speak about in the content that you provide, and that version of you that said it's time for a big ass change. And you speak so freely about how you've navigated that. So I guess to kind of kick us off in our conversation today, how, if you had the opportunity to sit down with your rock bottom girl right now, and if you got to go back and chat with that version of you that decided she needed this big ass change, what would you say to her?
That's a really good question. Honestly, I would probably just give her a hug because I think she needed one so bad
Yeah.
at that point in her life. It's funny, I'm not sure what came over me going through all of those changes because I spent most of my life putting on a smile, trying to be perfect, trying to pretend like everything was okay. Very much how I grew up. I grew up in like a very conservative family, which I love them so much. I love and respect the way that I grew up, but it was very much like you put a smile on your face, even when
Yeah.
things aren't okay. And that's how I lived most of my life. But I also lived most of my life people pleasing and trying to be somebody else. And it got me to a point where I was really, really like just unhappy, significantly unhappy with my life. And I kept making choices for other people. And it was a really scary time because it's my mid 30s when I made
Yeah.
this choice. I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of times people really change their life like in their early 20s when they're like feeling young and fun, and it feels more common then. Mid 30s didn't feel common. But honestly, I think I would just tell her that everything's going to be okay and to keep going, because in those moments when we're in rock bottom, the hardest thing is to understand that this is a season. It feels so permanent, but understanding that it's a season and there's another one coming, that's better than we could have ever imagined.
Yeah. And the other piece of this before we hit record today, I was like, there's really these kind of two pieces that I want to kind of bring together. You speak so well about just the mind body relationship and how those things are so intertwined. And especially when we're in a season of digging our ass out of rock bottom, that mind body relationship is something that really needs to be attended to. So when you were
Yeah.
climbing out, so to speak, how did you address that?
That was that was kind of forced upon me. I'll be honest, but I
Mm,
think it was the biggest gift that was given to me. So when I hit my rock bottom, it was at a point in my life where I was just overly stressed out. I was leaving a pretty abusive relationship. I had been focusing solely on trying to change and control my body because there was a lot around me I couldn't change and control, which I think is really
yeah,
common for women,
yeah,
right? If
yeah,
we feel like life's out of our control and there are certain things that don't feel good, it's like, well, the one thing I can control is like my food intake and my workout and
yeah.
how strong I'm feeling. And I ended up losing my cycle. I started losing my hair, which was just wild. I had never had that
Wow.
happen to me before. And went to my doctor, I got my blood work done, and she was like, you basically have to stop working out, which as a trainer and a nutrition coach is very hard for me because it's like ingrained in who I am. And so that was really almost forced upon me. And I remember coming home and crying, like ugly crying on the floor, because it felt like my safe blanket was being taken away from me, right? Anything that was very comfortable for me, I could no longer do. And I had to really hone in on who I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up, and say that, like, look, yes, taking care of myself in a physical way is really important, but what if I didn't put as much of an emphasis on that? And I actually dove into taking care of myself mentally. What would that look like? What does Katy need on the other end that I've never attended to at all?
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that created more permanent change in my life than trying to temporarily change my physical body ever did. Yeah. And because of that, my physical body followed maybe a year or two later, right? It was a big transition phase for me, but I was so much less concerned or connected to that piece because I was so sound with who I was. And I loved the way I was showing up in the world. And I loved the way I was giving to myself and giving to other people. And I broke through so many limiting beliefs, and I learned how to set boundaries, and I explored areas of me in a mental health way that I never had because I was so concerned with physical health.
Yeah. And it's funny. I'll just be honest with you. It's funny because the woman listening to this and I have a lot of conversations surrounding fitness, health, that sort of thing, and the ways that we have gravitated away from that space, like hardcore away from that space. And truthfully, my rock bottom girl was very similar and responded to it much differently. Much differently. So I was over there coping with food and food restriction and not moving my body at all. And not attending to the physical component of it because I didn't have time for that. No, we gotta hustle forward. Like, we don't have time for that. That goes on the back burner. So for the woman that is essentially doing the opposite of what your rock bottom girl did or was able to do or forced to do. She's not prioritizing her body and her physical vehicle that is going to take her through these things. What would you say to her?
I think we all have different ways that we cope with things, right? And whether they're like anything, whether it's a positive or a negative coping mechanism, too much of it is going to feel pretty negative, right? It's going to really, really impact us. And for the person that's not moving her body, if it's something that's important to her and that she feels like would help her mentally, right? My question that I always ask women is, regardless of any of the things that you're doing, right? Because we get so caught up in XYZ and have to's, is, do you truly feel happy and healthy? Right. And if the answer is no, like, and I'm speaking to mental, physical health, mental, physical, emotional, like if we're looking at all three of them, are you feeling happy and healthy in those? Are you are you pouring water into those buckets, or are they just like draining for other people? And if the answer is no, it's like, what is something small that you can do just today? Right? To give back to that, to nourish that, to honor that. Like, if there's a piece, a gap that you feel like is missing, instead of feeling overwhelmed or like you have to totally change your life around, it's like, what are small things that we can do every single day? I love like 5 or 10 minute ones, because for women that are feeling overwhelmed and rock bottom and feeling like they can't get up off of the couch, anything else seems really overwhelming. Going from like A to Z, where you're like 10,000 steps, drink water, take care of yourself in those ways. It's like, I can't even have a conversation right now without crying. So I can't actually do that. I think building confidence in yourself again and building belief in yourself again is so important. And that doesn't come by making these really big, drastic changes. It actually comes by really building confidence in these small changes, like this low hanging fruit that we can just grab onto and start to like fill our basket up little by little. And I do just want to say one thing, because I think when we're in these spirals where we're feeling like it's rock bottom, we don't know what way to go, is that we're always going to shame and guilt, right? We're programmed to go to shame, guilt, fear, frustration. And I realized that I was also very much programmed that way. And if you can shift that, right, you don't have to shift it to complete positivity and affirmations, because for me, those felt very awkward in my lowest times. But if you can just come from a place of curiosity instead of shame and guilt and fear, it's such a better place to be. If you can just get curious about the way that you're feeling. Because if you think about it, if you're in a fight with like a partner or a friend and they are like coming at you with anger and shame and the way that you're coming at yourself, nothing will ever get solved.
Yeah.
Right. But if you can just be curious about, why am I feeling this? Is there anything I could do to turn this around? Right? Where did this start? And where's the light at the end of the tunnel? Right? There's a point where we have to start getting momentum in a different direction. And being curious about that is sort of a neutral place to be versus like, we'll just be positive.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that also brings with it too, this idea of, you mentioned before control, and like that was your way in a time of rock bottom hood to control, right? That's the routine that you could go back to. And other folks may have other forms of control, and at times of stress where that's where we're going to go. And again, this is just me being honest. I shoot it to you straight. Like, you strike me as a person that seems on the outside extremely balanced these days. Balanced in all those kind of plates that we have going on that we have to carry. How did you go from really struggling with, I'm focused on that one area of my life, that's the one piece I can grasp onto, to now living more balanced when it comes to mentally, physically?
Yeah. For me, I actually grasped onto two different areas, which one was physical health, two was my business. And I was, again, just kind of like working myself into the ground, trying to feel successful in other things because I didn't feel successful personally in my own life. And it felt like, again, there was a lot in my personal life that felt out of control. So I was like, these are the two things I can control, and I can see like tangible wins with those. So I'm just going to like hyper focus and obsess on those two things.
Yeah.
And again, it was losing a lot to realize what was meaningful to me in life. And again, I think I was gifted this opportunity, and I know a lot of people listening don't know my story, but I moved from Detroit to Denver. I packed an SUV, moved across the country. I didn't know a single person in the city. So I wasn't losing my family. They were still there. They were just across the country.
Oh, yeah.
My family, my network. I taught in gyms. I had this huge community in Detroit, and going to Denver where nobody has ever even heard of me, seen me. Everyone's like, who are you, Katy? And on top of that, I ended up being part of this moving scam, which is wild. I packed all of my stuff up on this moving truck to Denver, and I left. They were supposed to be here in 6 or 7 days. It was a company that had hundreds of 5-star reviews online. They were all fake reviews, and they drove off with all of my things. We're talking bed, mattress, winter coats, boots, like my entire
did not know that part.
life.
Oh,
yes.
my God.
And I slept on an air mattress here in Denver for 3 months. Talk about rock bottom.
Katy.
Yeah. When you go from this like beautiful townhouse in Birmingham, Michigan, that's like fully furnished, to an empty apartment on an air mattress in a city where you don't know anyone, it is the most wild transition. And I went through a month or two, I would say, of like serious mourning of this like old past version of me, where I didn't know what way was up. But there was one thing that happened that really helped me shift things, because I was in therapy at the time, and I was like talking to my therapist, and all this stuff was going on. And she's like, Katy, on this healing journey, you're focusing on all of like the messy, right? Which we tend to do. The messy, the thick of it, like stuck in the muck, the journaling, the ugly crying, which is an important part of it. We have to show our emotions and get them out, right? But there's also this 50% that I don't think we put enough recognition on, which is like finding who we were outside of all that stuff, finding who we were before anything ever happened in our lives, right?
Yeah.
It's like that almost like going back to that like inner child of you, of like, who do you want to become? And like finding your life and getting to build your life. And if we're not focusing 50% on each, we're only going to get stuck in that one area, which is what most of us do. We don't realize that there's actually another half to healing. And it's the stuff that's going to make us feel unstuck and the stuff that's going to breathe oxygen back into our lives instead of just like sucking it out.
And we tell ourselves so frequently, well, like, no, I can't start over. All of this has happened already. I can't start over. I can't just erase that. And what I hear you saying is like, I'm not erasing it, but I can go back to previous me before this. I still know what she wanted for her life. I still know what she wanted to experience and what she dreamt about experiencing. And I imagine you're laying on this air mattress like 3 months in, like, what the hell did I do?
Oh, trust
What
me.
did I do?
Yeah, my mom got
Man,
more crying phone calls
I
and than she's
bet.
ever had in her entire life in those months, which was just wild. But at the end of the day, it for a long time I focused on like, why did this happen to me? And
Yeah.
what if it doesn't work out? And in order for it to work out, I had to shift my mindset to like, what if it does work out?
Yeah.
What if this works out better than I possibly imagined? And I think that we need that rhetoric more. Even though sometimes
Yes.
it can seem very far away, we know that the what if it doesn't work out mindset will only keep us stuck.
Yeah.
So even if you can catch yourself in those moments and be like, what if it does? What if it does? What's one thing I can do today to get it to work out for me? Right? What's one thing I can do for forward motion? And just start to have this full body belief in yourself, because I think that's what we need most of the time is this belief. It's what we're missing. We don't believe that it's possible for us. We believe that it's possible for everyone else. And coming from being the girl that was so broken, sleeping on an air mattress for 3 months, to creating the life and the business, and now I'm married, and it's like I would have never imagined this 2.5 years ago for me. But I had this belief that I knew it was going to work out, even though everything in front of me was telling me that it wasn't, especially my empty apartment, but it did.
Yeah. Yeah. And we tell ourselves that that season is going to last forever. A few weeks ago, the woman listening to this now and I sat down and had a conversation about just in the thick of it. My husband and I are in the process of renovating our home. I sitting there on the phone with him, like, let's just sell the house. Nope, we're selling the house. We're done. I can't. And just that in the thick of it, truly believing like this isn't going to be over. And then flipping that to, okay, well, what is the one next thing I can do? And I think that was, the other part of this conversation that I really wanted to have. I know the woman listening to this now well enough to know that she springs between a rock bottom season and burnout. Like we ping pong in between because we really struggle with balance. We really struggle with recognizing the difference between a hustle season and burning ourselves out.
Yeah.
So how are you navigating burnout in your life right now? Because you had to haul ass to get off that air mattress. Like
I did.
You had like it's not like it was easy. So how did you manage burnout in that process?
I had to manage how many changes I was making in my life, actually. And I had to realize, like, what are things that are foundations that I actually can't change right now because it's only going to make the situation worse. Sure. And then what are things that I can change? And in those moments, for me, my business, I knew that my business was going a different direction, but that felt very stable for me. So I chose not to do anything with that business. And I chose to focus on finding who I was and go more of a personal route with changes. So I think when it comes to like navigating burnout and balance, it's going to look different for every single person. But understanding that going in the direction of burning yourself out in every aspect of your life is going to do nothing for you. It's going to do nothing but like absolutely deplete everything from like your nervous system, your stress, like you won't be sleeping. It's going to impact every aspect of your life. And then it overflows into all of your relationships, right?
Yeah.
Where it feels like your entire life is in this like avalanche that you cannot control, but always coming back to the fact that it actually is in your control. And it's usually not big, drastic changes. It's simple things that you can do to set boundaries to create balance. Even if there are small things like, hey, the only time you get at night is like 30 minutes to yourself before bed and you're spending it watching Netflix or scrolling. Look, sometimes that's okay. But also sometimes your nervous system needs a little bit of a break. It needs a little bit of a hug. So what if we just tried for a week? What if we got curious, going back to curiosity, if we just put our phone away for 20 minutes before bed and 20 minutes before we woke up in the morning, and we took that time to ourselves? Like, what would that look like? What would change? And more than likely, how you start your day is how you end your day. So if you start it super stressed out, like running late, running behind, getting mad at everybody, you're more than likely going to end your day. But what if we started it with calm? What if one simple choice actually overflowed into every aspect of our day and it helped us feel a little bit more grounded? Right? Yeah. And that's not every day. Yeah. It's not realistic for every day. But what if we just practiced or got curious about doing that more with little things and see how much changed?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so funny because at the very beginning of this conversation, you were like, I was the perfectionist. I was the had to achieve, like had to get shit done. And I can hear her on the other end of this saying, okay, but I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
I don't have time to make that. How do we challenge her? Because she does. She
Yeah.
does have time. She has the same amount of minutes in the day that you do. How do we challenge her?
So understanding that you saying you don't have time all the time is also a coping mechanism. And it's a sign that you're not setting boundaries in your life. So we have the option to consistently repeat patterns or to change them. And look, like I say to I actually don't say to all women that I have the same 24 hours because I work with women that are like stay-at-home moms and, you know, they have 4 kids and a job. And I can't relate to that because I don't have any kids. I have a lot of different platforms and businesses that I run, but I don't personally have that. But I will say that I have worked with hundreds of women, and there's not a single woman where we haven't been able to find time in her day or to be able to set boundaries. It's usually a coping mechanism that you're telling yourself because you're busying yourself to death because you don't want to deal with what's actually going on in your head.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny because I think sometimes we truly listen to things like that when we put it in a more physiological perspective.
Mm-hmm.
When we hear the effects of burnout on our body, on the vehicle that's going to carry us to the next task, for that perfectionist, that task completer that's like, nope, I got to get to the next thing. Hearing that, you know, it is going to eventually slow you down if you don't slow down.
Yeah.
And I imagine there's been a season of your life where you're other than your rock bottom that truly was like, nope, you gotta cut it off there, girlfriend, that your body was saying, hey, it's time to slow down. What did you notice in you? What do you notice in your clients, in our body communicating to us that it's time?
Oh, 100%. So there's a lot of different like signs of burnout. And again, I think it depends on what level of burnout you're at, because some women are so disconnected from their bodies that they go years in burnout to the point where like their cortisol isn't working. They're in complete adrenal fatigue. Even caffeine makes them feel tired, right? So if we're at that level, it's saying that we have to put in some like really deeper steps to be able to like work through that. But I think again, no matter where you're at, it's saying and asking yourself the question that I always love to ask is, okay, do you feel content right now? Do you feel happy, healthy, strong, capable? If the answer is no, then we also know that this isn't working for you, what you're doing right now. So at some point, there's going to have to be change, because how much longer can you go like this? right? And most of the time when you're at rock bottom or where you've hit burnout, you're like on your breaking point. You're like, I can't go another week like this. And
Yeah.
it's like, okay. So I always turn it around on them. And everyone listening, like, I really want you to ask yourself is like, what can give right now? What is
Yeah.
a boundary that you can set, right? Whether it's a morning or night routine, whether it is having space in your schedule and not actually committing to something. Like learning how to have space in my schedule and saying no to something that just didn't feel good, even though I had space in my schedule, was the hardest thing to do, but also the best thing that I could do. And understand that protecting and honoring your mental, physical, emotional wellness, like you don't ever need an explanation for that. Right. And when we live in this hustle culture where we always have to be going, like life isn't meant to consistently check things off a to-do list. We're not meant to like be born and then die and like have checking things off a to-do list in between. We're meant to live a little. So like, how can we breathe some life back into you?
Yeah. And you mentioned this component of, so many women are just not in tune with their bodies at
Yeah.
all, at all. And we are so used to just blocking that out, I think, or
Yeah.
ignoring it,
Mm.
or going too quickly to even notice. So get like super tactical with us here for a second. And what is like one thing
Mm.
that she can do to get more in tune with what's going on with her physically?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is education around our
Yeah.
bodies. For most of our lives, we're told that our body is our worth. So actually there's two things. So most of our lives we're told that our body is our worth. So one of my things for women is like, when was the last time you set a goal that had nothing to do with your body? Because anytime we set a goal, it's like walk 10,000 steps, drink water, like lose weight, work out this many times a week, whatever it might be, it's always our body. So if we want to learn who we are outside of our body, then we have to be able to set goals that have nothing to do with our body. And I have clients that set all different types of goals. One of my favorite ones is I had this 60-year-old woman named Donna who had literally dieted her whole life. Her body was her life. She was never, ever happy. And she set this goal to learn Italian. And she did. She started to learn Italian while we were working together, working on her health. But like the confidence and the brightness that it brought to her life was like the best thing I've ever seen.
Oh my gosh.
And then two, outside of setting goals that have nothing to do with your body, educating yourself on your body is the best way to reconnect to it. Creating awareness around your body outside of dieting, outside of what we've been told we should look like our whole lives. Whenever I am onboarding a health and fitness client, I always ask them the question, okay, before you were told what you couldn't eat, what diet worked, what diet didn't work, what exercise was the best for you, HIIT training burns the most calories, before you were told any of that, what did you enjoy the most? What felt the best to you? And a lot of times it's like, well, dancing or Pilates or yoga or whatever it might be. Maybe it was sports when they were younger, but starting to reconnect to areas in your life that felt good before you ever unlearned anything or before you ever learned anything about your body. And then actually truly learning how your body works, like your hormones, your metabolism. As women, we're never taught those things, which is why I'm so passionate about teaching those on my podcast, because women come to me and they're like, I didn't know my cycle should be like this. I didn't know that this was causing so much stress and anxiety in our lives. A lot of the things we're feeling can be symptoms of our metabolism down regulating, of our hormones being completely imbalanced, of our sex hormones not existing, of high blood sugar, right? We can be snippy, we can have anxiety, stress, depression, and it's not always caused by that. But a lot of times the disconnection from our body over years is causing a lot of these symptoms or coping mechanisms that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, oh man. And there's just so much to consume on your podcast, but education wise, because I feel like it is not judgmental. It's not a you have to do it this way. That's never the approach with you. And I just appreciate that. So I am gonna switch gears on you kind of completely here for a second.
Let's go.
Because the other piece of your story, you made this change, I would say pretty abruptly. right? You
Yeah.
decided it was time. And I
My
imagine there
parents
were
would say that too,
people.
Emily.
Yeah, yeah, that's exactly where I'm going. Like, I imagine there were people in your life that were like, Katy, what the hell are you doing?
Mhm.
What are you doing? And
Yeah,
maybe still to
everyone.
this day don't understand, right? So
Yeah.
how did you navigate that initially? How do you
Mm.
continue to navigate that now?
So I knew that if I stayed in Michigan, I was going to repeat patterns that I was unwilling to accept anymore in my life.
Yeah.
And I had tried to fix them and heal them. And I'm a big believer in like, you can't fix yourself in the same place that broke you, in the same environment that broke you. And I know not everybody is able to move across the country like I did. And I don't recommend it for everybody, but I also think there are ways we can change our environments to heal in a better, like more positive light. But yes, I got a ton of pushback. I remember I went out with my best friend for coffee the day before I was driving to Colorado, thinking my best friend would be like, yes, let's go. I'm so excited for you. And she said, Katy, don't you just want to get on a dating app and meet someone and have kids? And she meant it in a really good way, right?
Absolutely.
She
Absolutely.
wants me to be happy in life,
Yeah.
but it was understanding that that isn't what I wanted. And what is going to make somebody else happy isn't going to make me happy. And I had made decisions most of my life for my parents, my family, my friends, people around me. And that got me to being 35 and needing a massive change in my life.
Oh,
So I didn't want to be 40 or 45 feeling the same way. And even though they had opinions on what was best for my life, I had to lean into this full trust in myself that I knew what was best for my life. And I had to get out of Michigan.
yeah. Yeah. And how did you communicate that to them? Because I imagine part of a poll would be like, I got to make them understand, like they'll get it. Like I'll explain and they'll get it. How did you navigate those conversations?
I had to be radically honest, which was so
Mm,
hard for me. Again, like recovering people pleaser, I love to
yeah.
sugarcoat everything and
Mhm.
I love to make everyone happy. And when you're sitting there and your parents are worried about you and your mom is crying and your best friend's telling you not to go and your sister's telling you not to go, I had to, I almost had to show them this full body belief and I had to let them see it. It was hard for me to explain to them in that moment why this was best for me, but I just had to tell them that I know that my life is meant for something more. And now they would be like, this is the best decision Katy ever made. And they're so proud of me. And guess what Katy did? But I couldn't let their fears control my life.
Yeah.
And that's what I had to really let them
Yeah.
know is this is a fear that you have and I can't carry that with me because I know that I'm capable and I know that this is the right move for me. And look, I might end up in Michigan a year from now crying, being like, why did I go? But
Yeah.
also, I might end up married in Colorado with
Right.
this like
Right.
beautiful life, right? Like,
Yeah.
yes, it was 50-50, but I also knew Michigan would always be there.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times, the things that we're so scared to leave, we have to understand that they'll always be there if we want to come back to them, right? They might always be there. But what if we shift the focus from what we're going to lose to what we're going to gain? Like, how much
Yeah.
more amazing would that be? And that's what I really had to do.
Yeah, and the same goes for changing a career. It doesn't have to be our living situation, changing a career, changing a relationship, like that in some form is still gonna be there later.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that this is goodbye forever. Like that's yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I
It's
love
kind of
it.
how I lived a lot of different transitions in my life when I went from doing hair, because I did hair for like 8 years, to the health and fitness industry. I was like,
Yeah.
I can always go back to doing hair.
Yeah.
But this is what's like really lighting me up right now, right? And
Yeah.
same thing with like from moving from Detroit to Denver is like, well, Detroit's not like falling off the face of the earth. It will
Right.
always be there. I can always go back. But
Yeah.
like, what if this new life was going to take me somewhere different?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like the word that continuously just comes to mind for you and your story for me is just like balance. It's such a balanced way to look at change, to approach our wellness, to this it doesn't have to be in extremes. It can just be curious. And
Yeah.
I love that. I love that. So to kind of wrap us up, what
Yeah.
is something going on in your world right now, currently, that you're just really excited about?
I've actually never told anyone this. You're going to be the first person. Like, I don't even think my husband that's sitting out there that might be listening to this knows this.
I love it.
So this is new. So
Okay.
anybody that knows me knows that I love dancing. It's something that has like really helped me heal in my life.
Yeah.
Again, I did not start dancing till like my mid 30s. That was a whole thing, but I was asked the question of like, what do you do for fun in your life by my therapist? And it took me 2 weeks to answer because I couldn't come up with what I did for fun in my life, which is wild. Because she told me that working out didn't count. Because like my immediate answer would be like deadlifts or bicep curls, or it's just it's like what I do. I work and I work out. So I was like, honestly, probably dancing would be my answer. She's like, awesome. When are we signing up for a dance class? And that one dance class was the scariest moment of my life, but it really transitioned into me reconnecting to my body in a way that made movement really joyful again versus very structured. It's now transitioned into my business and my content. You see me dancing online all the time. Some people love it, some people hate it, but it's just who I am as a human.
Yeah.
And I'm signing up in the beginning of December for a certification, which is called Turn Up Dance Fitness. And so I'm going to be a dance fitness instructor.
No way. Oh my God. If you have connected with Katy on Instagram at all, you just know that that is perfectly aligned. Like that's supposed to happen. Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So exciting.
I can't wait. Honestly, I think I'm just gonna like find a studio here in Denver and really try and build up this community of women that just want to move their bodies and have fun.
Yeah, and again, the epitome of like I can change and move and do whatever I feel called to do whenever I feel called to do it. I love it so much.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh. Katy, thank you so much for your time and your realness. And I just appreciate you. And I know that the woman listening to this does too.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Of course. We will talk very soon.
Okay.
Dude, thank you so much for including the kind mind and this freaking weirdo in your growth journey. If you connected with today's episode, I would love to hear about it. So slide on over into my Instagram DMs at Emily and the Kind Mind and let a girl know, okay? But until then, I will talk to you very soon. I love you so much, and you stay kind to that freaking mind.